Hello everyone, good afternoon. Now I would like to presentation about setting on the forest. So before I start the presentation, I would like to say Panganjali Umat, Om Swastiastu. So let's start our presentations. The first, I would like to introduce our members. So the first is me, Komang Rosyana Hartining Putri.
And then me, Kadek Intan Lestari.
And then me, Kadek Ela Dwiyanti.
And then me, Putu Intan Nursanti Sanjaya.
And me, Pande Putri and Ferdinand.
So we have four contents in this presentation. The first is definition. The second is purpose and benefit settings. Type of setting. The last is analysis setting in Snow White story. This material will be continued by my friends.
Okay, thanks for the time. I will explain about definition, settings or background in the time and geographic location within a narrative, either non-fiction or fiction. It is literally an element. The setting indicates the main backdrop and mode for a story. The setting can be referred to as story world and milieu to include a context, especially society beyond the immediate surroundings of the story. Elements of setting may include culture, historical periods, geography, and hour, along with the plot, character, time, and style. Setting is considered one of the fundamental components of fiction. Okay, next. Okay, the benefits. Setting is important for providing context for the action of character in the storyline. Setting can also create an atmosphere how the reader or audience feels. It easier to understand why character in a story do what they do, when we know where they are, the time of day, the time of year, and age of the character will also affect how they act and what they say. And the purpose of the story setting is to provide a clear picture so that the events that happens in the story actually happen or provide clear information about the situation in the story. Okay, the next material will be continue with my friends.
All right. Next is type of setting. There are several types of the setting, namely setting of time. Setting time is the duration take that require for physical strength to be fully giant by the summon. It is the time required to stiffen and the seventh water pass over the definite consistency. We can say the time setting is the time when the event, scene, and act takes place as a background. Leads to when the events told in the literary work occur, for example, year, season, day, and hour. Next is setting place. Setting place is everything that describes the location of an event that is told in a work of fiction that refers to the geographical area in the form of place with certain name or initials, perhaps certain location without clear names. The place can be anywhere in the world or in your imagination. For example, a country or a city, large city, a small village. Next. Next is setting of social environment. In a story, it usually contains a social environment which explains the social status of the characters in the story or how social behavior occurs in the surrounding environment. Even in a particular society or particular social class, there are a part of setting of social environment, namely beliefs. The first one is belief. Belief are the tenets or convictions that people hold to be true. Individuals in the society have a specific belief, but they also share collective value. For example, belief in the tree that can cure a disease. The second is friend lines. Friend lines is how someone has a good attitude toward someone. For example, say hello when meet someone. Next is culture. Habits that are carried out by someone in an environment in the story. For example, wearing kebaya. Next. Next is educational condition of figure. The educational condition of figure is how characters, educational background, or what kind of education is obtained. Example, for education at school, character education, flexible place. Emotion, a strong feeling such as love, anger, or strong feelings in general, like happy, sad, and angry. Next. All right, this material will continue by my friends.
Thank you for the time. Now we talk about setting of physical environment. The physical condition is the setting that can be seen and felt. The setting that relates to time and place. For the example is from the setting physical have a part, namely is air, animals, build, environment, line, plants, sounds, climate, structures around an individual. So the first I would like to talk about the air. The air where in the story where will be discussion about the air, where the air will be described how the condition in its story are like. For example, cool, cold, hot, so on. The animal, where when a story or film is read or write, there will be an important role for animals in it, or animal have a good or bad characters, and very film certainly depict an animal to be played. It could be a character in the story in the form of pets, or wild animals or from the forest. For example is a wild tiger, clever monkey, lion the king of the jungle. That's for example for animal. Next, built environment. The built environment touches all aspects of our life. For the example is water and electricity and the roads, bridges and transportation system we use to get from place to place. Fourth, the land is the solid part of the surface of the earth. In the story, it's mean where on which land is the story built. For example, in the mountain, kingdom, flowers garden, river, and anything else about the land. And then plants. Plants are those that support the atmosphere in the a story that give life and color to a story. For example, is wild plants in the forest, plant in gardens, leafy plants, leaf, roots, stems, flowers, fruits, meadows, grass, and parasites. So the next. The next is sounds. Although figures of sounds are often found in poetry, they can also be used effectively in the prose. For example, is the sounds of the birds in the forest, the sound of monkeys, the voice of Mother Snow White then talking to the mirror. Is it about the sounds in the story? 7 is climate, the weather condition prevailing in an area in general or over a long period. For example, is winter in the kingdom, spring in the forest. The last is structure around an individual, organizations of personality in terms of its basic inherent components and their make a relationship. For example, is romantic, making friends, relationship with our parents, and relationship with Snow with her mother. Now we talk about setting off Little Snow White story. Is it the analyze? So this material will be continued with my friends.
All right, thanks for the time giving to me. So the first one, I would like to explain about the the analysis setting of time in Snow White story. So in this Snow White story, most of the time the story is mostly at night and morning, where the problems of the story are mostly at night and morning. Why? It can be seen from the story of Snow White. So here is the quote in the night. So the first one, when night came, the seven dwarfs returned home from the wood. And then the second one, nightfall soon came, and the seven dwarfs returned home. So from those quotes we know which where the quote describe many time setting that refer to at night when the seven dwarfs come home and find Snow White for the first time. And then quotes in the morning. The first one, the queen thought that she was again the most beautiful woman in the land, and the next morning she stepped in front of the mirror. And then the second one, which she stood in front of every morning. So, which is where the quote describes many time settings that refer to in the morning, because every morning the queen always asks the mirror about her beauty. And then the second one is analysis setting of place in the Snow White. The place setting in the story is almost 80% using the place setting in the kingdom and the forest. This is because there are many scenes that Mother did in the kingdom and Snow White in the forest. Sometimes the setting is also specific, like in the bed of dwarf's house, and some explanation of the place in the castle where Snow White almost died and was married by the prince. So let's see in analysis quote below. Quote in the kingdom. Now the queen was the most beautiful woman in all the land. From that quote, we know that the setting is in the kingdom, where there is a queen who is proud of her beauty. And then second one is in the forest. The quote is, the huntsman took Snow White into the woods. And then Snow White was now all alone in the great forest. So where is the setting in the forest, explaining that Snow White was thrown into the forest and wanted to be killed. And then setting place in a dwarf house. The quote is, she tried each of 7 little beds. And then she came to a little house. So those quotes describe Snow White coming to the dwarf's house and lying on their bed. And that can be said to be the setting. And in the castle, so the quotes are, the first one, the prince had it carried to his castle, and then their wedding was set for the next day, as Snow White's godless mother was invited as well. So from that, we know the prince made a wedding ceremony for Snow White and him, and the setting place is in the castle. So for the next material, will be continued to my friends.
Okay, thank you for the time. The next one is analysis setting of physical environment in Snow White. We start from structure. The dwarf greeted her and said, if you will keep house for us and cook, sew, make bed, rest, and knife, and keep everything clean and orderly, then you can stop here and you'll have anything that you want. So, which is in the quote, Snow White and the seven dwarfs make friends and even establish family relationship, where the dwarfs allow Snow White to live in their house. And then plans. The quote is, Snow White was hungry and thirsty, so she ate a few vegetables. And Snow White was now all alone in the great forest. So, which is why the quote includes plant because the forest has a lot of trees, fruit, flower, and other. In the quotes there are many big trees and food, and Snow White gets food like vegetable in the forest. Next slide. And then animals. The quote is just then a young bird come running by. For the example, in the story Snow White, the elder used animals to be killed so that the stepmother believed her soldier ordered to kill Snow White, where the soldier replaced Snow White's heart with the heart of a deer stalk, because the soldier did not have heart to kill Snow White. And then R, the quote is once upon a time in midwinter. And then Snow White was now all alone in the great forest. So where the R described cold and cold because she was born in winter like the quotes above, and cool because she is in a beautiful forest and lots of shady trees. Next slide. The next is the book and foreman. The quote is, Snow White was now all alone in the great forest. In the Snow White story, when Snow White was not killed and she was released into the forest, Snow White spoke to the entire forest so that no wild animal would eat her. Snow White also told nature about her sadness because her stepmother she did not feel comfortable living in the kingdom and exiled herself to the forest, so she found a dwarf house. The next is plan. The quote is, because only the 7 dwarfs live in the 7 mountains. So, which is where she lives in the mountain with the 7 dwarfs. They live far away near the mountain so that Snow White is far from her stepmother. And the last one is sound. The quote is, mirror, mirror on the wall, who is in the land is fairest of all. And the mirror always says, you, my queen, are fairer of all. So this quote includes sound because the stepmother always opens sound which asks her beauty to the mirror every day. Until the end of the story, she always asks her favorite mirror. Okay, the next material will continue by my friend.
Setting of environment in Snow White. First, belief. The queen believed that Snow White has been killed by a hunter when she ordered the hunter to kill Snow White because the hunter had brought her lout and liver to the queen. We can see it, paragraph 3. She cooked them with salt and ate them, supposing that she had eaten Snow White lungs and liver. Okay, and second will be continue with inference.
All right, thanks for the time. The next is emotion. In Litera's Snow White story, the most common emotion in the emotion of anger and sadness. This can be shown in several fragments of the story where Snow White's mother is furious and hates Snow White because she had matched her beauty. We can see on the couch, she began to plan immediately how she might kill her. And the next, then she went into her most secret room. No one else was allowed inside, and she made a poison apple. Next. In addition to the anger of sadness, there is also a lot continue in the story. They show when many unfortunately even befall Snow White, who is hated by the queen. Repeatedly, the Snow White was almost killed and made the people around her feel sad. To see the bad luck that always befall her. This can suppose by looking at some fragments of the story in the incidents such as when he took out his hunting knife to stab her, she began to cry. And the next is they laid her on a bier, and all seven sat next to her and cried for 3 days. At the end of this story, Snow White get his happiness after living from the dead and finding a prince. The things in can show in the quote. Then the terrible piece of the apple that she had bitten off came out of her throat, and Snow White come back to life. The next. Okay, and the next will be continue with my friends.
All right, the next is educational background. So in the story, the character is not told to lead a formal life, but when she is exiled to the forest, she learns various things such as cooking and cleaning. This is evidenced by the following sentence. If you will keep house for us and cook, sew, make baths, wash and knit, and keep everything clean and orderly. So that's the quotes. And the next material will be continued to my friend.
Okay, thank you. The next is friendliness. Friendliness itself in the Snow White story can be seen in the draft ethics always being nice to Snow White during their stay with them. In this case, Snow White's story also has very good attitude toward the people around her. This we can see in the several quotes. The first one, they did not wake her up, and then she unbolted the door and bargained for the body's length. Okay, next. And the last part will be continued by my friend.
Okay, now is culture. In culture, there is a custom of the queen to ask about her beauty and not want to be matched with anyone. We can see this in the sentence. Now the queen was the most beautiful woman in all the land and very proud of her beauty. She had a mirror which she stood in front of every morning and asked, "Mirror, mirror on the wall, who in this land is fairest of all?" And the mirror always said, "You, my queen, are fairest of all." That's the example about the culture. Next. So that's all about our presentation. So if you have any question, let's discuss when we get the class, the plus class. So thank you.